The Philadelphia Eagles are 5-point favorites at home against the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Steelers have a stout defense, and their offense has been much better with Russell Wilson at quarterback, but with George Pickens out, we expect them to struggle generating explosive plays. Having said that, our first bet of the day is going to be a double bet: Saquon Barkley over 20.5 rush attempts and over 98.5 rushing yards. When we look at this Pittsburgh Steelers defense, they're stout overall, but let's dive into their run defense. Their run defense allows 4.1 yards per carry on designed runs. That ranks 14th in the NFL. And in specific, in 11 personnel, they're giving up 4.9 yards per carry on designed runs. That's 24th in the NFL. The reason being is they have a really stout and really strong interior defensive line unit, and really their front overall is good. And when you get into 11 personnel, they take one of those defensive linemen off the field, and it makes it much easier to get double teams on those defensive tackles on the interior. So I think the Eagles will probably play a lot of 11 personnel in this game. When we look at last week with Dallas Goedert out, the Eagles came out in 11 personnel on 83.9% of their plays versus the Panthers. Saquon Barkley, for his part, received 80% of his carries out of 11 personnel as well. So we should expect that same thing to happen in this week's game. Nobody has slowed down this Eagles run game, not even the league's best run defense and the Baltimore Ravens. So I don't expect that the Steelers are going to slow them down as well. I imagine they will be a little bit stronger than some of the opponents they face, but I don't think anyone is really shutting down this Eagles rushing attack. When we look at non-quarterback designed runs by the Eagles, Saquon Barkley is receiving 78.7% of those total carries. But when we remove the games where Saquon Barkley doesn't play in the fourth quarter, because the Eagles have had a few blowouts on their hands, he has received 87% of the carries. So he is receiving a huge workload. And we do expect him to, regardless, if he's getting 78% of the carries or 87% of the carries, he's going to get a big workload either way. The biggest downside I see to this bet is the play total potentially, as the Steelers offense will commit to the run game. Even if they're not having much success, they will stay committed to the run game to try to keep themselves in manageable third downs. They lead the NFL in time of possession, so we could see some lower play totals that could lead to some unders, but I still expect the Eagles to come out and be able to run the ball, and I expect Saquon Barkley to get his carries. Now, pairing with that, let's look at our next bet, which is going to be Russell Wilson under 196.5 passing yards. The line has been bet down significantly since it opened at 210.5 passing yards, and for good reason. Last week, without George Pickens on the field, Russell Wilson completed 57.7% of his passes. That was his third lowest of the season, and he averaged 6.1 yards per attempt, which was his second lowest of the season. And that was against a bad Browns defense who ranked 30th in yards per attempt, allowing 7.9 yards per attempt per pass. And now they face an Eagles defense that is first in the NFL in yards per attempt at 6.2, and they've been even better since their Week 5 bye, only allowing 5.6 yards per attempt. Russ's yards per attempt versus the Browns was 26.5% below expectations with Pickens in, and his completion percentage was 6.6% below expectation as well. I do expect the Steelers to be more efficient in a full week of practice, knowing they're not going to have George Pickens, but I don't know if it's going to matter a whole lot when they're facing a much better defense, a big step up on their defense. For that reason, I do think that the Eagles, even though the Steelers have led the league in time of possession, I think this is a reason why we could see the Steelers not be as efficient, and we could see the Eagles hit their play totals needed to hit some of their overs. But having said that, we're projecting for 183.3 passing yards for Russell Wilson. Looking at our last bet of the day, we are going with Jaylen Warren over 20.5 receiving yards. With George Pickens out last week, Jaylen Warren tied his season high in targets per route run and saw his second highest route run rate. He would have had more than his 2 receptions for 25 yards against the Browns, but the Browns didn't really push the Steelers and make them open it up through the air by keeping the game really competitive. And as a result, Russell Wilson had his lowest dropbacks of the season versus the Browns. We don't expect that to continue this week, as the Steelers are underdogs heading into the link. But we do expect the Steelers' offense will have to rely on more manufactured touches with Pickens out just to keep the offense on schedule. And with George Pickens not on the field, they're going to be less likely to generate explosive plays through the air, and they're more likely going to have to dink and dunk their way down the field, which could lead to some more higher play totals just in general for the Steelers offense. But in addition to that, the Eagles run defense is allowing 3.5 yards per carry on design runs since week 5. And that likely forces the Steelers to have to rely on the quick passing game as an extension of the run game. So we should see some extra plays to Jaylen Warren and Najee Harris, just trying to get them the ball in other ways out of the backfield. For that reason, we are projecting Jaylen Warren for 31.6 receiving yards. Now, I know this week, a lot of the conversation and focus has been on the Eagles passing attack, and a lot of people probably are going to want to take some of the Eagles passing numbers and their overs, especially A.J. Brown, right? He has been talking this week. The squeaky wheel gets the grease. He didn't necessarily come out and say, I need more touches. That's not what he said. He just said the passing game needs to be better overall. And looking at this Eagles offense, I don't think they're going to come out and start throwing it for 35 times a game, 35 attempts a game, just because they struggled a little bit last week with the Panthers. I think the focus is cleaning up some of the protection breakdowns, having Jaylen just play on schedule and play more efficiently, and just, again, playing more efficiently overall for this passing attack. I don't think this means they're going to come out and just try and force the pass down the Steelers' throat. Having said that, this does set up as a game where A.J. Brown typically receives more of the target share because he's playing a team that plays so much single high coverage, a lot more man defense, a lot more press. So I can see very easily A.J. Brown going over his receiving props, especially his receiving yardage. But this isn't something where I'm going to try and force the Eagles passing game. It's just been too volatile, and especially with how many attempts that they're not really having in the game, it just makes it hard to predict if guys are going to hit the over. And normally I would say to take the under, but it's kind of hard this week when they might come out and throw it a little bit more. But again, I don't expect them to throw it going from 21 times a game and since the bye week to now throwing it 35 times in this game. So we'll have to see how that plays out, but I still expect the Eagles to continue and try and win with their bread and butter and mix in the passing game. But having said that, that will be it for this week's Best Bets. Good luck to everyone, and we will be back again next week.